Hi there! Welcome back to the Rogue MFA YouTube channel. I'm Bree, and today I'm talking about my latest article for our Substack, which is all about character-driven plot structure. Now, if you have been paying attention, last week Kelly posted an amazing video and article about the 5-act structure and how she and Shakespeare and a gentleman in Moscow use it to help lay out the events of their work. She also has this amazing diagnostic tool that she included for our paid subscribers. If you're not already a paid subscriber to our Substack, you absolutely should be. We have so many cool templates and fillable worksheets and checklists and diagnostic tools that are exclusive to that, plus, a bunch of other stuff coming soon. So definitely go check that out if that's useful to you. But for me, as much as I really appreciated the way that Kelly broke that down, and as much as sometimes I will use structure similar to that, the idea of using numbers to plot out my novel and thinking, at this point in the book, this should be happening. It fills me with such existential terror that I can't get out of bed. So when we were talking about what we wanted to post, when we were talking about high-level structure and outlining, I knew that was just not going to be something I could participate in because that's not how I write. But what I have been doing recently, and what I ultimately ended up writing my article on, is how I use thematic and character-driven structure as a way to almost more intuitively plot out books. Now, the thing is, the way that I plot and outline books does ultimately end up looking like a 4, 5, or 3-act structure book, a more traditional, repeatable structure, but I can't get to that point by thinking of it in those terms. So what I instead do is what I've been calling a thematic or character plot structure, where I pick something that is more about the way that the character moves through their world, or the way that the theme I want to explore exists in an external structure, and map my story points to that. So I know that sounds really vague and abstract. Don't worry, we're going to break it down. I have 2 examples for you that I have used recently that I thought were pretty neat. Things that I should do is not helpful to me, but this is where this would happen based on the thematic structure that I've decided on. That's much better. So the first example I'm going to give you is I wrote a paranormal romance novel a couple of years ago about grief. And I realized pretty early that there was a very clear arc in terms of the high level plot structure that I could absolutely map to the stages of grief. So I picked 3. The other 2 were absorbed within, but I essentially wrote a 3-act structure book, but the 3 acts were denial, bargaining, and acceptance. So what this meant is that instead of breaking up the story in what should happen in the first third of any book, I broke it up in what are they in denial about, and how can I make sure that when we are in this phase of the book and the story, denial is sort of forefront, denying themselves, denying each other, denying reality. And as I moved through the story beats that I was working through, once it got to a point where denial no longer felt like kind of the high level theme of that section, I knew it was time to move on to bargaining. So in this way, instead of being like, I must be a third of the way through the book, because these certainly are not neat thirds, right? It's not a perfect 33% of the book that encompasses the denial phase of, my external plot structure. But what it did do is when I got to narrative crossroads, or when I got to points where I wasn't sure where a character should be going, I could look to my external character-driven plot structure, and I could decide, is this person still in denial, or are they ready to start bargaining? Again, bargaining with themselves, bargaining with the cursed creature that lives inside one of their heads, bargaining with each other, bargaining with the world and other characters. If I felt like they were ready for that, then I knew I was in a new phase of the book. And then that started to guide the decision. So what are ways in which these characters can continue the story, knowing that the phase that they're in is a bargaining phase? We're not going to make any declarative statements here. We're going to be spending a lot of time kind of in conflict, but also, getting closer to a point of compromise. And then by the time we get to acceptance, I know they're ready for that because I have been mapping them out accordingly. This ultimately ended up being a pretty textbook 3-act structure book when you zoom out and look at it once I wrote it, but I couldn't use the textbook version of 3-act structure to plot it out because I just didn't feel intuitive to me. So perhaps if you are someone who very, very structured advice on manuscript outlining gives you a tummy ache, maybe following along with this will help. Another example of how I have used character-driven plot structure is I recently wrote a contemporary romance about 2 actors and about kind of the concept of fame by using Dante's Inferno. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not writing Catabasis. I'm not literally having these 2 characters go on a journey through hell, but hell and the way in which Dante kind of described it is such a useful starting point, I found, and especially in a book about, you know, how you are being perceived and how you are presenting yourself and the sort of like performative nature of identity. Sin and hell and, you know, the way in which other people judge you seemed like a really natural place to start mapping out some of that journey. So I, of course, did not use all 9 layers of hell in this contemporary romance novel about actors having threesomes, but I did find it helpful to consider, you know, which layers of hell did I feel thematically resonated with the kind of stuff that I was doing and would provide fertile ground for conflict for my 2 characters. And so then I picked a couple of those and used that. So instead of a 5-act structure traditionally, I had a Dante's Inferno structure. And then again, it ended up being a pretty traditional 5-act structure, but it was built more intuitively and with the characters in mind rather than, you know, specific guideposts that I'm meant to be mapping to. For some people, that's very helpful. For me, it was not. So that's why we wanted to sort of showcase an alternative option if that is something that maybe vibes with you. So if you want some other ideas of some great existing thematic and character-driven structures that you might consider for a future book of yours, we have those locked behind our paywall for our paid subscribers on Substack. So definitely go check that out. We have that, plus a ton of amazing templates and worksheets and fillable checklists and diagnostic tools. We are building an MFA program that doesn't put you into debt. Definitely go check that out. There's a lot of great stuff. And in the meantime, I will see you soon.